We're here to discuss ways that you guys can secure an internship this coming summer. And I really want this to be interactive. You guys need to just jump in there and ask me questions. But I'm going to talk to you about just the culture of science. I'm going to talk to you about the mindset of the folks that may be evaluating your applications and how do you put yourself in the best position and to win. All right, so here we go. All right, so what most people don't realize is that the science community is small, right? Like at this stage, you're like, oh, what do you mean by small? I mean by, in the United States, probably around 3,000 people every year come out and get a PhD in chemistry, another 3,000 in physics, maybe another 3,500 to 4,000 in math. Like there's not a lot of people who are doing science at a high level, and they know each other. And so, when I was in graduate school and I was doing research on stem cells, and this is at the very kind of cutting edge of stem cell development in the late 1990s, if I would have left the country and went to China or somewhere else to do research, the government would have known about it. So that's what I mean by the science community is small. And so when you get a chance to work for people, especially ones that are higher up, I would say in the food chain, it just allows you to be able to leverage what they know, but also leverage their relationships as well too in this small community for what you want to do moving forward. So this is my science pedigree. And so the very first person that I worked for at Berkeley was Jonathan Ellman, who did his postdoc for Peter Schultz, who at the time was the chair of chemistry at Berkeley. I believe he now is the president of Scripps, but he may have moved on from there. And he did his undergraduate work at Harvard for David Evans. And so the second person that I worked for at Berkeley was Peter Schultz. So I was able to get into his lab through Jonathan Ellman, and he was able to vouch for me. So, Peter Schultz at that time in 1995, 94, 95, 96, pretty much throughout the 90s, was the top chemist in the world, right? So when I say like the top chemist, I mean he started a handful of companies. He got nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize every year in the 90s. Like he was the top chemist in the world. And you can imagine, his lab setting, because he took the top 2 graduate students in the country every year came to his lab. And so you have an environment with a bunch of folks that are really super duper duper smart, but you still have folks that are being successful at science and other ones that aren't. But it was like a lab setting where I had a chance to really see things operate at a high level and understand the culture. And some of those things I'll pass on to you as well. But yeah, it was really, really, really interesting. And then this person, Renee Ray Hopera, this is the woman that I got my PhD under at UCSF. And she worked for this person named David Page at MIT, and she did her graduate work at Cornell. So the pedigree is more like if you were an apprentice for Albert Einstein, right? The idea is that you were trained by this person so you can learn how to think and approach things similar to this person, and then now like you're his child, you're being sent off to the world, and then this person is being trained by you. You know what I'm saying? Like, so that's how they think about it in regards to like your pedigree. But it only matters in these circles of people who are really into like STEM and science. They'll know who are some of the best people, and then they'll be like, oh, you work for such and such, okay. And if that person vouches for you, it means a lot, if that makes any sense. Any questions so far about anything that I said? All right. So the mindset of a professor at a Research One institution. Research One means that research comes first. So those are places like UC Berkeley, Stanford, UCSF, Harvard, like those are Research One institutions. And So when you go to a Resource One institution, those professors are there, especially in STEM, because they're brilliant. They bring in millions of dollars of grant monies to do research, and the institution is also trying to patent their stuff to make money too. Research comes first. Teaching is secondary or thirdary. No, I'm just saying, if you have somebody who's brilliant and they're the best person in the world at this, they will be at the institution, period, no matter if you complain about them or not, because they're brilliant and they're at the top of the food chain. Now, places like, say, a state university, like San Francisco State, those professors are there to do research 50% of the time and to teach 50% of the time, right? So you may get a better teaching experience at institutions that primarily focus on teaching. However, at a Research One institution, you may be taught by someone who's brilliant, but they either may or may not be a good teacher, right? So, there's this trade-off there, but I just want you guys to know, like, there's a difference. And so the mindset of someone at a Research One institution is research is everything, right? And they want to train people to be just like them. Oh, you say you want to be a medical doctor? Why do you want to be one of those? Don't you want to do research? Don't you want to create? I'm not saying that, it's bad or good, but like if they're hardcore, they maybe just be thinking like medicine. Oh, you want to do MD, PhD? No, just medicine by itself? Okay. So just, again, they want to train people to be just like them. They respect individuals that are creative and can think conceptually. They're not impressed that you have a photographic memory. I can look that up on the internet. Can you think? Right? Can you make unique connections between things that were unrelated and understand patterns of things that we didn't see before? Are you a good thinker? If that makes any sense. So that's what they respect. No matter what you look like, you could be someone who's 3 feet tall, like with a unicorn thing coming off the top of your head. If you can think, then they're gonna be like, that's what's up, right? And then in these institutions, it's publish or perish. So publications are really your currency as a scientist. Like, that's how you get your jobs, is through where you publish at. The top 3 journals in the world are Science, Nature, and Cell. So even getting a publication in one of those journals can get you a job at a high-end institution, right? So that's where the rubber meets the road. You can be the most brilliant person in theory, but if you don't publish, if you're not able to actually actualize your theory and show that it's actually true or not true, then it's like, what are you talking about? Huh? What? Right? There was one of my mentors, there was a joke that he was saying, not a joke, it was a statement. He was saying that results is everything. Everything else is rhetoric. So you're just like, you talking a lot, but what did you publish, huh? But so why should I be listening to you? You doing, right? Like, and again, I'm talking smack right now, but you guys get the point that I'm making. That like, at the end of the day, it's going to come down to the things that you publish. Unless you're in a government setting and they're doing stuff and you can't publish it, or you're working for a company that's probably not going to publish it because they want to make sure that that intellectual property isn't out to the public until they can secure it in a way to make money, right? But in an academic setting, publish or perish. All right, any questions for me?
So let's say your friend wants to transition into public research. How would he do that?
All right, so to put it in context, if you have someone who works in a government setting and they're working on things that the public doesn't know about, then they have to then again sign non-disclosure agreements to not do any work on that in the public. So they can move into an area of science that they haven't been exposed to information that other people don't have and potentially do that research. Or, and I'm kind of making this up, but I'm sure it probably happens, they may be able to be a professor at an institution and have a relationship or collaboration with the government to work on things that they want this person to kind of bring out into the public in a way that other people can know about it. So does that make sense? So, you know, you've heard about the military industrial complex, and they do work with people in certain companies and industries in academia. And a colleague of mine who's a professor at UCSF even has a contract with DARPA, which is a, you know, U.S. government military organization that has a lot of technology as well too. So, you know, the government's going to have their hands where they can, and if the collaboration is such where they're saying, we want you to use your expertise to then, and we'll pay you to kick that back to us, that knowledge, then, you know, it's just more of the relationship. All right. Anything else? Go ahead.
How long does it usually take to like get a publication out, and like what makes a publication good enough to like get in the top 3 journals?
It's a good question. So I can say that the conditions when I was going through, because I'm an old head, 20 or 30 years ago, are slightly different now. But to get a publication, it's more about, do you have a complete story, right? Because it's, you know, and it's not even really a complete story. It's something that you can wrap up in a way, because the science is going to continue. There's always more questions to ask. But do you have something that's a complete story where you have a beginning to the end, and this is a solid piece of work that the people in your field area would agree to? So, you know, in publications like Science, Nature, and Cell, or what they call peer-reviewed journals, you're going to write up your publication, and then you're going to send it off, and they're going to choose experts in that area, and they're going to review your stuff. And they're going to say, oh, well, we want you to do these 2 additional experiments. This is cool, but, you know, I don't think you actually answer. You make a statement here, and you say that this experiment suggests that, or does it indicate that, right? Like, people, you know, scientists parse their words. So they may have edits for you to do, and if they believe that your findings, your discoveries are at that level of what that journal represents, then it'll get published. Nowadays, there's a lot more collaboration happening between scientists. Back when I was going through, scientists were a lot more isolated, and they didn't want to share their stuff as much because the competition could try to publish their stuff before you. But now there's a lot more cross contaminate, not, you know, cross links between I'm an organic chemist. I'm going to make these small compounds for you, but, you know, this person right here works in zebrafish and C. elegans as a model organism. I want that person to test those for me to see what kind of response my compounds, my drugs have in this organization, and then they may then shoot that to someone who does work on mice to see what kind of response, and then they may collaborate with somebody who works in larger organisms like pigs or whatever, so they can try to get it to, you know, move along the food chain that maybe have that drug approved at some point, right? So there's a lot more collaboration, so that means that there's more people on some of these publications than they normally would, and, you know, and maybe, and then, you know, but you have more people kind of helping out and sorting through who's going to be on paper, and at what the order is going to be, and who's going to take credit in that way. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah. So I have a question then.
Mm-hmm.
Like, who gets to be one that's publishing? There's so many different like people involved. Like, who gets the main credit as the guy?
So there's going to be 2 people who are going to get the majority of the credit. There's going to be the first author. So whoever name comes first, they're going to get credit for this. They're the primary person driving this project. And then the person at the very end is going to be the primary principal investigator, meaning it was their lab, right? You may have other investigators. This person right here is from UCSF. This other person behind them is from MIT. This person right here is from such and such. And you may have other people in between, but the very first person, who's the first author, It's their project. And what you're also just asking, kind of indirectly, is where you come in on a project during a summer internship. And I'll talk more specifically about that and how you can potentially position yourself to get on a publication. But if you're starting a new project, then no, it's not going to happen. All right, any other questions? All right, so these different pathways. So there's the traditional summer research programs, and those are what people call the REUs, research experiences for undergraduates. And these are primarily funded by the government. So, it may be at whatever institution, at UCLA or Berkeley or Stanford, but it's ultimately being funded by the government. And I'll tell you more information about like what they're looking for. But those programs are really geared towards training people and getting to the place where they can apply to graduate school to get a PhD. Right? The country that we live in right now, United States, is at the very top of the food chain in the world in regards to being a superpower. And they're not dummies, because we can intuitively and rationally understand that the country that rules science and technology rules the world. And if you want to even be more specific, you can even say the country that rules energy rules the world, right? So our government, that's the one reason why they make it free in this country to get a PhD in a STEM field. Well, they'll not only pay for your tuition, they will give you a stipend to live off of, because you have to discover something new to get the PhD, right? It's different than medical school or dentistry school. Those aren't graduate degrees, those are professional degrees, because you have to take an exam and learn information, and you automatically will get that degree. Graduate degree, a PhD, you have to discover something new. And that's why that's the highest degree in the land, is the PhD. So with that, they want to make sure that the Apples, the Microsoft, the Googles, the Facebooks, the Teslas, I can go down the list, all get created in this country. And then what does that do? It allows the country to stay on top, and it creates jobs, right? So I want to make sure you guys understand that's the mindset of the government, right? And that's the reason why our government in the U.S., if you have a really good idea, they will give you free money to develop it. Don't think Google didn't get free money from the government. Don't think that space didn't get free money from the government. If you have a really good idea and you put together and write a proposal with a team of people and you have the expertise to deliver it, they'll be like, yeah, we should shoot a couple $1 million. Because again, they're creating industries, right? Any questions? Thoughts, comments? All right, so then there's also volunteering in a research lab, and that may just be you're going to a place that does research and you're saying, Coach, can I get in? I'm going to volunteer for free, right? These programs, they're going to give you a stipend. Volunteering in a lab, you may get to a place where they can give you money, but at first you're saying, I just want to get in the lab and actually learn some stuff, and I just want the opportunity. And then there's lab assistants, and so there's labs where they need somebody to wash dishes, they need somebody to be an assistant to somebody, and they're paying you by the hour to do that, but you still can potentially get on a project and learn a lot of things as well too. So I'll talk about the pros and cons. The pros about this one is that, it's 8 to 10 weeks, and every year you could have a variety of different experiences. So one summer you could be working at this particular university, doing things. If you're a biochemistry major, you could be doing things in cancer, and then you could go to another university the next year, and you could be doing things that deal with stroke. You know what I'm saying? Like every year you could have a different experience. So that allows you to have multiple letters of recommendation if you do like an internship every summer. there is a potential for publication, and there's also an opportunity for a project. So what you want is to get on a project. What you don't want to be doing is just doing assays for somebody else that's not connected to something bigger. Because you're going to want to talk about that to somebody later, depending on if you're trying to get a job or you're trying to get into a school or grad school or whatever it may be. You want to talk about the project so you can talk about the big picture of what you were doing and then how your piece fit into that. The cons are there's less opportunity to grow with the project because it's just 8 to 10 weeks. Right? You may have less opportunity to interact with the principal investigator, the PI of the lab as well, because it's 8 to 10 weeks. So those are kind of the pros and cons of the summer research program, the REUs. Now, when you volunteer in a lab, and you can also do that while you're in school. So when you transfer to a four-year university, and when I was at Berkeley, I did research during the school year as a class. So I'm working 20 to 25 hours a week in the lab, and and I have my project. And then during the summertime, they're paying me. The principal investigator has some money to pay me to do to continue that project, right? So I'm continuing it during the summer, and then I'm also doing the project in the fall. So I was at Berkeley for 2.5 years. I didn't do research my very first semester, but I did 1 full year doing organic chemistry, synthesizing prostaglandins. And then I did another year working for Peter Schultz, the second person, doing more bioorganic chemistry. So I had a full year-long projects, and I got publications out of each one of those projects, second author publications. So again, I had longer time, and and along with that, you could sit with the project and sit with the things that you're learning a lot longer, because the 8 to 10 week period is pretty intense, and you're trying to make sure you retain everything afterwards. And so that's why I always encourage students to, if you're reading any journal articles, save all of them. If you do a poster or presentation, save that, right? So when you go back in front of somebody to interview and you have that on your resume, you can still talk about it with the specificity and the details of what you did it before. Because if you don't, and I'm interviewing you, and you're like, yeah, we did this, we did that, and then I did this, and I'm like, okay, so give me the details about da-da-da-da-da. You're like, well, actually, my postdoc did that, or my grad student did that. I'm like, oh, is that right? So you didn't really do that then, right? So you want to be able to, when you put things on your resume, back it up with your knowledge. And put yourself in a position to do that for years to come, if that makes any sense. There are also opportunities for personal letters of recommendation, stronger chance of publication, opportunity to be on a more significant project, interacting with the PI, and then also have opportunity to understand lab dynamics. So I was one of those kind of persons when I was, your guys' age, where I wasn't the smartest person, but I kind of had some street smarts. I was smart enough. I mean, I could hang with folks, but I had street smarts. Like, I kind of I watch people. I observe people. So I was one of those kind of cats where if I'm in the lab, especially that high-powered lab, right? There's people in there who are, that are knocking it out the park. So I'm rolling up on them. I'm saying, so, what were you thinking about when you chose that research project? And someone they're like, okay, well, I chose your project in a way where I wanted a quick win. I wanted to be able to get a publication, not in a Science, Nature, or Cell right off the bat, but I wanted, like, within the first year and a half, to get a publication in a strong journal, and then I would swing for the fence and then expand that to a project that could be a Science, Nature, or Cell. Because if you go for the big project at first and you never get that, you ain't got no publication when you're going to graduate, right? I'm like, okay, that makes sense to me, okay. And then I'll go to somebody else in the lab who was effing up, and I'm like, what were you thinking about when you chose your research project? I'm like, oh, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that, right? But I'm going to ask. because they chose and went after a high risk project. So there's ways that you can think about it where, are you creating something totally new because that you have that innovation part of you and you want it, that's the kind of experience that you want, but it's high risk. Are there projects in the lab where this professor has these things that have already been established, but they need to be extended? And there's a lot of opportunity for them to be extended. Oh, let me just jump in on this and then extend this real quick. And then I got a parallel project I'm bringing up on the side, right? And then I'm gonna let that be my high risk project, but I'm gonna push the gas pedal on something that I already know I can see, show some results in a certain amount of time. So anytime you're building new assays and you're creating new things, it just takes time. And it takes time to build it, to optimize it, to get it to work. And then you start collecting data. That may take you 3 or 4 years just to do that. And then you start collecting data, Now, I also say this is that one of the guys in the second lab that I was in, he, super brilliant, valedictorian, Harvard chemistry, dude was super, super smart. And to be honest with you, I kind of used to hate on him because he was smart, but he was actually really nice too. I was like, I could hate on you more if you wasn't as nice. But you were actually kind of cool, right? And then in my mind, I'm like, I gotta be better at something, right? So I'm like, I'm gonna get you at video games. He was murdering me at video games. I'm like, damn, that's usually my go-to, right? And then he was like, Fred, you know how to dance. Teach me how to dance. Teach me how to dance. I was like, hell no, I'm not teaching you how to dance. That's all I got, right? I know. I was petty back then, but I've grown since then. But anyway, yeah. He chose a project that literally, and again, this is the middle 90s. He was trying to synthesize unnatural amino acids. There's 20 amino acids that our body makes, and there's ones in this lab that we were creating that weren't part of those 20, and he was trying to synthesize those in vivo to create proteins that were incorporating these unnatural amino acids in cells, which you're like, damn, for real? And did he finish it? No. But he got halfway through it. Everyone thought he was brilliant, and he got offers at Berkeley and Harvard right out of grad school, and now he's a professor, and he started 5 or 6 companies, his first company, and he's one of those cats right there, right? But I'm just saying is that some people, they just got that smoke. And I'm not mad at him, but he was that dude. All right, any questions about anything I said so far?
I have a question.
Sure.
So when you have an idea for something to research about, how do you filter out the ideas that you can kind of work off of to have be your main project? How do you filter out ideas that can potentially not get there?
That's a good question. So if you're in grad school and you're a graduate student, you're going to be reading about, you're going to come up with some ideas. You're going to be reading all these different papers of what's known in the field about that. So you're going to kind of go through your own process of understanding what people really know about it. And then you're going to start to then, put your own proposal together and figure out how to develop a pathway to find out what the solution is. And then you have a qualifying exam committee, and you're going to have 3 or 4 professors then grill you for a couple hours on that proposal, try to take it down. And then if you then pass that, then you feel a little bit more confident that you actually have a pretty good idea, and you prove to them that you have a viable pathway to get to it. But that's graduate training, less of an undergraduate coming in, because when I was a grad student and I had undergraduates work for me, I would give them a project that was doable in 8 to 10 weeks, right? It may be a smaller part of my projects that I was doing, but I'm going to give you something that's doable because, one, I want you to have a good experience, and I want you to be able to okay, this is what I contributed, versus, I have you on something and you don't get any results and there's not too much you could talk about afterwards. So I'm going to give you something that that I know that if it was me, I should be able to do this in 8 to 10 weeks. And of course I may, if I see that you're efficient or, or productive, I may give you a couple extra something too, just because you got broad shoulders or whatnot, and then see if you can handle it. But I'm testing you in that way because at the end of the day, when you go to that principal investigator to get that letter of recommendation, they're going to go back to the grad student or postdoc that worked with you because they're going to know you more than they did and be like, what's up? I'm going to be like, okay, yeah, now this person's on point. You know what I'm saying? I gave them this project right here. They were able to conceptually understand the big picture. You know, every day I was kind of testing them. You know, I gave them research articles to read, and they could go through and pick apart the things that they knew and they didn't know and ask good questions. You know, the stuff in lab didn't work right away, but they had the emotional intelligence to kind of deal with the failure, and they kept pushing through. You know, hook them up, right? But I'm studying you, and I'm letting you know that they're going to be studying you too. Right? Especially if you're working on my stuff. Because when you're doing research, the people who are actually depending on that for their livelihood, either to get a PhD or to get a job, it's serious to them, right? And they're trusting you with their stuff, and they're trying to make sure that whatever integrity they have and whatever standard they have and whatever rigor they have around that process, that they can feel comfortable with you kind of having something similar, if that makes any sense. And so my approach when I first started doing research was always, and in the very first lab that I was in, synthesizing drugs, that first summer, you know, I worked 20, 25 hours a week during the school semester. But during the summer, you know, the grad student and the PI was kind of like, well, how many hours a week are you talking about working? And I looked at the grad student, I was like, well, how many hours a week you work? I said, because when you come in, I come in, and when you leave, I leave. He was like, okay. I was like, you move, I'll move, just like that, you know? And I was letting him know that I'm going all in, like, let's go. But that allowed, when it was time for me to get letters of recommendation, to be able to get this person is Jesus and he walks on water letter, right? I'm talking smack, but I'm just basically saying is that you want someone to go to bat. And if they actually are a star in the science community and they go to bat and say, and write you one of those blazing letters, then that's a ticket to go anywhere and you want to know. And to take a step back, and I know I'm talking a lot right now about this, is that one of the grad students that I applied to, they didn't believe the letter that professor wrote for me, and they called him on the phone to ask him, did he write that letter, right? And, what I'll also say is I know what he wrote in the letter because, I still was kind of shady back then. So I applied to a grad school that I knew I wasn't really going to apply to. And I said, just give me your letters sealed and I'm going to mail the package to them. And then I opened up all the letters and I read them, right? I know. Again, I had a little street smarts, right? So when I read his letter, I had to go to the dictionary and look up words. I'm like, okay, what does this mean? Like he was... and so this person calls him on the phone and I see him in the hallway and he's like, Fred, he's like, are you applying to such and such? And I was like, yeah. He's like, yeah, the person in the department called me on the phone and asked me about the letter of recommendation I wrote for you. And I was like, oh, okay. I was like, what'd you say? She's like, I just told everything that I said in the letter. I was like, that sounds about right. Because he was like, I look forward to reading publications in Science, Nature, and Cell from Fred in the future. I look forward to him winning the Nobel Peace Prize. Like he went to bat. But I put the work in and I was about my business, right? So anyway, I'm just giving you guys those as just examples to kind of just put a little meat on the bone. All right, let's see. All right, so lab assistants, the pros is that it's paid work. They're going to pay you for that work. Sometimes you need some chips in your pocket. You need to make sure you got, the food is on point. Opportunities for personal letters, potential for publications, more opportunities to work, interact with the PI, and you can still look at and understand lab dynamics, right? But you may never receive a project. They may be paying you to wash dishes. They may be paying you to run jails. They may be paying you to do things that the whole lab uses. And sometimes, you never get to having that project. But I can guarantee you that if you're in a position like this, and they start to see that you're capable, then you can ask for a side project, or somebody in the lab be like, oh, okay, I'll give you this side project, because they see that like you're capable of it. But that would be the goal if you're doing in a position like that, is to get a project. And I also say that that as a lab assistant, sometimes it depends on the lab you're in, how big the lab is. If you're in a lab that's really established, then there's going to be certain opportunities that may be available there, or not. And if you're in a smaller lab, a lab that just started, then they may put you on a project quicker because they need all hands on the deck, and they just realize you get your extra hands, right? So, there's a difference between a principal investigator that's established, that's already made a mark for themselves, and someone who's just coming in new, and they're like, I got to maximize what I got. Oh, you're a lab assistant? Okay, but I need you to do da-da-da-da-da-da too, right? Just like when you start a new company, you're starting a new startup company, you got 5 people working, everybody is doing things outside of their classifications because you just may have them. Versus you come in, you work for a Genentech, no, you are going to be in a very specific line because everything has already been established, right? Does that make sense? All right, any questions about any of this?
Can you
Go ahead.
explain what's the difference between a research assistant and a lab assistant? Are they the same thing?
The same thing. Yeah, I mean, they may have a different title, but it's the same thing. Any other questions? All right, so you also want to know, what are your goals? And how do your goals connect to research? So maybe your goal is, I want to get my bachelor's degree, right? And with that bachelor's degree and doing research, it's going to help me get my first job, my first entry-level job in engineering, in computer science, and whatever that area is, because at the end of the day, anytime you get hands-on application of things that you're learning, first of all, it makes the things you're learning makes more sense, and you can ground it, but it also gives you additional things to talk about during that interview, that first interview, right? Because if me and someone else both went to comparable universities, and we both have very similar grade point averages, and I did research and they didn't, then, I can talk about that and talk about how I was able to add value in a way that the other person can't, right? We both have similar, smarts or intellect, and we both have similar grades, but you can talk about how you were able to apply that with examples, with letters from that person who you work for, adding to that as well. Or maybe I want to go to grad school someday and I want to get a PhD. So this is training me on how to be a scientist as I'm going through, and it's going to allow me to use that as a springboard when it's going to be me deciding what projects I want to do, and me being able to help deliver on that. Or it could be for a host of other things as well. I just want you to be clear and make that connection for yourself, because I think it's valuable as you write your statements or whatnot that they're looking for, but also what you want to get out of that summer. Like, these are my goals for myself, and this is what I want to get out of the summer. All right, any questions? All right, so maybe your desire is, I want to be trained on how to think like a scientist. And I'll say that, scientists, they ask questions, right? So they ask questions, and maybe based on the kind of questions that they're asking, they create a model of what the solution could be. Is it A, B, C, or D? Right? And then you want to then be able to design experiments that will delineate, is it A or B or B or C or B or D, right? But just the process. Each discipline has its own process that it goes by to try to discover and create. And that's going to be different than someone who's in engineering, who's going to be able to have to design something and go through the process of refining it and optimizing it. They're going to have their own process that may be different than someone who's a chemist that's going to have to learn how to take something that they want to create as a drug, go to the library and synthesize it on paper first, and then start to go through the experiments of getting it to that product at the end and making sure every step is optimized so it can be at a high efficiency. So each discipline is different, but you want to learn based on what your area of study is, how to be trained on thinking like a scientist in that area. I use the word scientist because I never wanted to be pigeonholed into a label. Like, because I was really good at organic chemistry and by the time I finished that year of organic chemistry, I literally could look in the back of a medicine bottle, look at the active ingredients, draw out the two-dimensional structure. I could then go to the library, the chemistry library, and look up experiments and then synthesize that mug on paper. And then I could then go through and start to actually go, create those pieces. I could be like, okay, I can go through this journal. I can go through this catalog, look up what starting materials I need. I had that ability, right? So I could have went to grad school on organic chemistry and been a person who just synthesized drugs, but I knew that I wanted to actually study genetics. But my mind likes to think more mechanistically. It likes to understand the details and the relationship between things. But when I started grad school, and genetic folks, they like to disrupt genes and then see how it affects the organism, right? A biochemist is going to want to understand the proteins in this pathway. How are they interacting with one another that allow this process to work? And literally, my research project, I was doing biochemistry and genetics. But the way I was trained on how to think like a chemist played into my ability to model build and understand how bonds want to come together at a very deep level. And so the only difference between me having a PhD in genetics versus biochemistry is really because after my PhD was signed, my thesis was signed, I said I didn't want a PhD in biochemistry, and I handed my thesis to the person in the genetics department. Like, there's no difference. So I just labeled myself a scientist, and I just want tools to problem solve. But that's just how I viewed it. And there's going to be others that are going to be like, no, I'm a chemist, I'm a bio, that's based on their ego and how they want to present themselves to the world. But at the end of the day, I just want to be a person who can ask good questions and find ways to get to the solution. Using any means that are available, right, to get there. So that may be part of what you're looking for, this coming up summer. Of course, there's the letters of recommendations and the reasons why you may try to leverage those in the future. Like some of the folks in the room may be like, I'm trying to get a publication. What's up? That's my goal, right? And maybe if you're working with somebody and you tell them that, they could try to put you on something that can get you closer to a publication. In my mind, if someone publishes something and you were able to contribute a figure to that paper, then your name should be on the paper. So again, if you're working on something that's an extension to somebody else and you're able to then create that figure and they use it, then, that's a blessing, right? Potentially. You may just want to try out research for the first time or pad your resume. All right, so any questions or thoughts about this? Go ahead.
Does the title of the recommender matters? Let's say if I could have a PhD to help me write a recommendation letter, or I should find the people who know me most, who are familiar with me most.
What is the letter of recommendation for?
Let's say for just the summer research program.
Oh, to get into a summer research program? I think in general, especially if they ask for a couple, you want to choose people that can talk about different aspects of you. So if you have a professor that can talk about, what they see about how your mind works based on the class that you took, and how you were able to, demonstrate that. But if you have another person who maybe they're a director of a science program and they have another aspect that they can talk about, you want the letters to be able to kind of tell a more complete, holistic story. And if you're strategic about it, you can then ask the people who are writing letters to talk about different aspects that you're choosing up front for them to talk about. So from that standpoint, it's really about who is going to, one, write you an effective letter because they know you in a personal way. You don't want people to write about, you scored in the top 10% of this class that I had, and I rank your mind at such and such and such. That's not a good letter. You want somebody who can connect to you emotionally, that understands, your past and what you've gone through, and can add layers to it that's more than them looking at your grade point average, right? They can look at your grade point average and your grades in those courses and come to their own conclusion on their own. But you want somebody to talk about other aspects of who you are as a person. Do you have emotional intelligence? Do you have persistence? Do you have grit? When things don't work, how do you rebound from it? You want somebody to be able to talk about some of those other aspects. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
All right, any other questions? All right. All right, so selecting a program. So you want to understand the goals of the program. And again, if it's a REU, some of the goals and most of the goals are to produce future scientists. So I'm saying this up front. If you're interested in going to medical school and you apply to REU, do not put I'm interested in going to medical school in that application because they will triage it right away. Now, if you say I'm interested in getting an MD PhD, that's different, right? But if you just say straight medical school, they're gonna be like, that's not how we get. We trying to, train people to be like us, right? They ain't like us, I'm Kendrick Lamar. Anyway, Mac. But my point being is that you want to understand that like the money is coming from the government for those RAUs, and that's part of the goal. Some of it, and they do have programs for physicians and dentists. So there's not as many of them, but if that's part of your goal, then that's what's up. I worked with an undergraduate student when I was a grad student at UCSF that wanted to go to dentistry school. I still had him doing research for me, but he was in a program specifically for dentistry school. And, he's probably right now, pulling out some money's teeth right now, hopefully in a cool way. But that was his goal. And some programs may want to diversify the field of science. So you really have to look at that language when you're reading, that application and the guidelines of what they're looking for, and think about it in a very strategic way, if that makes sense. Any questions? Go ahead.
Will you have access to this presentation, to the slides?
Sure. So I'll say in general, when we're videotaping this, so we can make that available to folks, period. But if you guys email me, or if one person email me, and potentially I can just put the slides up on the MESA website, but you'll have access.
Thank you.
All right. At what level of education is the program recruiting folks for? So there are specific programs for freshman level and up. Those are there are not as many of those types of programs as there are juniors and seniors. Because you can imagine too, these programs are also trying to bring smart people from all over the country in and recruit them to potentially go to grad school there. You're a junior? Okay, you had a great experience here at Stanford, are you thinking about applying here? For a PhD program? Let me know, right? Especially if they like you. So you want to know that students who are getting ready to transfer, you really are a rising junior, right? Because when you transfer and you start wherever you're at that university next fall, you will be a junior there. So that's a really good time for a lot of programs to go for the ones that are more competitive, because really you are a rising junior by the end of this spring semester as you then, climb into that lab during the summertime. But the ones that are for freshman level up, you just got to make sure that you see that's kind of where they're targeting at. All right. What I didn't talk about is that, there are summer research opportunities in companies, and there's also summer research opportunities in the government. So that's working for NASA, that's working for the Lawrence Livermore Lab, and a lot of times the ones for the government, they are paid, where they pay you by the hour. And, there may be some limitations on, again, the publication game, depending on what they're doing. And do you need to have a top secret clearance to actually, maybe do some of that research as well too. But we can talk about that more, if you guys have questions about that later. What are the components of the program? So most of them have some kind of poster presentation that they want you to do at the end. Even if they don't, it's just a good opportunity for you to gather all the facts and informations and data from what you actually learned over the 8 to 10 weeks and then talk about it. Right? It's one thing to be like, okay, I'm reading this right here and I believe I understand what it is. And it's another thing to put it into words, stand in front of somebody and deliver that and answer questions about it afterwards. But that process will allow you, when you do have to talk about it later, potentially for an interview or a job or whatever it is, to just have practice doing that. Right? And it also allows you, if you want to then go to STEM conferences, to be able to practice doing that, because people, can get a chance to know who you are by you presenting your research to them. And then some of them may have seminars. So at Research One institutions, there's brilliant people from all over the world that come there pretty much every week to give talks. And I would encourage you, if you're at a Research One institution, to go to them. I mean, first of all, a lot of the things may be over your head, but even if you retain 15% of what they said, people talk about some interesting stuff. And it also may give you a sense of just what other people are doing, the kind of questions that they're asking. But it's a good look if you're thinking about, wanting to get a PhD and doing research at some point in the future, to start to kind of immerse yourself in the culture and understand who are the people in the field. Any questions about in the first 2 bullet points? Okay. Some of them have dorms that you can live there. Some of them have opportunities for you to select the potential lab. So on the application, as you're applying, they may say, list 2 or 3 people that you would want to work for. And that's where you actually really have to go into the department or the areas of that university that you're interested in and research people who are doing things in areas that you're interested in, and then write that in part of your statement to that program. Because they may go to that person or 2 and ask them, would you be interested in taking this person in your lab? And if they do, that may be one of the reasons why you got selected for the program. Because 1, you're a good applicant, but you also had somebody who was willing to take you. And then for you, it's a win-win, right? Because you actually get a chance to work for somebody that you're slightly interested in, and you can get it. Any questions about that? All right. Course stipend, and then what are the expectations in the culture of the program and the university? Every university has its own culture. Every department and program has their own culture. For some things that you may be applying to, maybe somebody who applied there and got there before, so you can kind of talk to them about what their experiences were like. But I'm just making that statement that not every place is as friendly and has the environment that, depending on your personality, that will allow you to flourish than other environments. But you kind of have to know yourself and get a sense of like where you want to place yourself, especially if you have options. All right, any questions? All right, okay. Preparing your personal statement. All right, so you want to talk about your vision for yourself and the career you want to have in the future. And you want to make the direct connection between how that training that you want to get during the summer is connected to that. So you don't have to say, I know that I want to be an electrical engineer that works in semiconductors, that does quantum this and that. But you don't have to go into that much detail about stuff. But if you have broad strokes, right, like kind of what you're trying to do is let the person know that you thought about it some, and whatever you write about, if I read about it, am I gonna kind of get fake wig juiced about what you want to do? Right? I'll be like, okay, that sounds interesting. Right? Like you kind of want to write about it in a way, but don't be like, oh, I have no idea. I've been thinking about genetics since I was 2, and then I watched Jurassic Park, and then that led me think about genetic engineering, and then I want to work in your lab. Like, what I'm saying? Like, no, don't do that, right? Like, kind of, I'm not saying you guys would do that, but you guys get the point that I'm making, right? Make that connection. And why you're passionate about science. So if you write it and you are juiced and passionate about science, it should come out in your writing. right? Like you should be using words that are active that's gonna give me juice. And not, well, then I wanna, and then like I'm so excited about this sign. I'm gonna get in there and I'm gonna do this and that. I'm ready to go. Coach, let me in. You know what I'm saying? You want to bring that kind of energy to your personal statement. And then I'm reading about like, oh, okay. Matter of fact, I may want them in my lab. They say they want to go here. Now they need to be with me, right? I mean, scientists be thinking about that stuff. And you know, so it's one of those things where you want to bring your energy to the personal statement in a way where it transfers to the person who's reading it. And so part of that is understanding what are the key factors that will make you a successful scientist, right? So you need the ability to problem solve. I talked earlier about learning how to model build, how to ask good questions, right? Persistence and determination. Are you creative, right? But as a scientist, you know, you have to be able to communicate well because you may be not only teaching somebody about your research, but you may be giving seminars and talking about that, you know, your ideas too. So the ability to talk in front of people and communicate is huge, right? You also need to be an excellent writer because scientists, they have to write proposals, they have to write grants, they have to write publications. And there's a whole art to how you write. And so one of the persons that was on my thesis committee was an excellent writer. And she would write in a way where I'm giving you at the very beginning of this publication the idea of what's been known before. And then as I'm writing, I'm talking about my experiments, but I'm talking about it in a way where I'm letting you come to a conclusion that I want you to come to without me saying it. And then I say it later, and you're like, damn, that's brilliant. But I laced it up like that and led you down there with these breadcrumbs. And then since you came to that conclusion yourself, unconsciously, you're gonna be like, oh, this must be true. And it's validating you, right? I'm just saying there's levels to it, right? But you have to be an excellent writer as well too. So, and then of course you have to be able to control your emotions, right? Because 90% of the time your stuff isn't going to work, and you know, are you flipping out, you know, throwing beakers and stuff in the lab? And I'm gonna keep it 100. When I was at Berkeley, both labs that I was in, lab 1 and lab 2, there was times where I almost seen every single grad student flip out and start throwing beakers. I'm like literally just against the wall, so in my mind I'm like, I can't wait till I'm a grad student so I can flip out at one point. I know it sounds stupid, but I'm thinking this, right? I'm like, I can flip out and start throwing some stuff on the wall too, right? It never happened, but like I thought it was normal. But in that environment, it kind of was normal, but it was abnormal in the big scheme of things, right? But can you control your emotions and stuff? Yeah, I had fun with it, but I was like, damn. You know, you can hear them, and then my experiments say, You're just like looking through the window like, what's going on with them? Crazy. All right, any questions about this? All right, here we go. But make connections between your life experiences and how they have prepared you or are preparing you to become a scientist. This next slide will kind of give more information about that. So on here, this is like your professional goal or your career, whatever that is. You can kind of write that on top. And then what do you think are the key success factors that will allow you to be great at that, right? So we talked about scientists. You got to learn how to model build and problem solve. You have to learn how to be an excellent communicator. You have to be an excellent writer. Like there's things that, you know, you can kind of put in there. And if you don't know what that is for your career, talk to people that are in your career field about what makes them good at what they do. Now, from my standpoint, they could have 5 things that make them good at what they do. And maybe you have potential for 3 of those qualities, right? So maybe 2 of them, you're like, I don't know if that's me. They just think differently in that way. But if you talk to other people, you still may get a collection of things that maybe can fit into, not everyone who's good at being a cardiologist have the same unique traits, right? or how they see the world or how they engage their profession. And if there's areas where you're like, I think I may have that trait, then you can then try to put yourself in situations to develop it, right? You can be very intentional around, I wasn't the best writer when I was in grad school. And I had to place myself and get the things that I was writing in front of people that would just ink that shit up. And I'm gonna keep it 100 because as a student of science, we don't have to write a lot. You're doing problem sets, right? Like you're a problem solver. I mean, I got B's in my English courses, but it ain't like I'm writing like I'm some kind of liberal arts major. And so I had to ask myself, I'm like, talking to myself because I do it all the time. I'm like, so Fred, like, how do you know all these rules that deal with the universe and physical laws and natural laws, and you don't know all the laws to writing? Because your ass is lazy. No, I mean, I just didn't care enough. I just didn't care enough. And then I was like, now it's time to care. So I learned all those rules. I always had flow. I could always talk for mine. So then, when I learned all the rules and got my flow together, then I put my little spin to it. All of a sudden, I was like eating it up, right? But my point being is that like I intentionally put myself in situations to develop that because I knew I needed that for some point in the future. And I want you guys to begin that process of really being intentional about what the things you believe you need and collect that data and, and kind of put yourself in positions to win. So these are extracurricular activities, and the extracurricular activities could be adding to these success factors and you don't know it, right? Say you're somebody who wants to go to medical school and you want to be a surgeon, but your extracurricular activity that you like to do is play basketball. Well, maybe you make the connection between playing basketball and working on a team, learning how to identify each person's strengths and weaknesses, being able to anticipate what their needs are and working towards a goal, and how that skill will allow you to excel in the operating room, right? The person reading will be like, oh damn, I never thought about that before. And if they haven't thought about it before and they're interested in it, then it makes you stand out, and that's how you win, right? Because you've done that inner work and you thought about these connections yourself. So, and the last thing are, what are my talents and what are my strengths? And how are those adding to these success factors? So what I'm trying to do in short order is have you guys take this process of applying to these summer research programs as a way of self-reflecting and getting a deeper understanding of who you are and how you can maybe leverage this for the future and be conscious of it. And I really believe it's going to pay dividends if you do that moving forward, because when people ask you about, why are you here and what do you want to get from that, you're not just on the side of your neck start making some stuff out on the spot and then looking at you like, some person making this up. You actually coming across authentic because you've really thought about it and your passion about it is coming through, and they're like, okay, all right, good. All right, any questions? All right, I think we're getting close. There's a recommendation. The goal should be always to develop a connection to the person who's writing that letter. So I cannot state enough that you want to be able to ask that person, not can you write me a good letter recommendation, can you write me an effective letter? Because it's going to do what it needs to do. And if that person says no, then they did you a favor. Because you'll be surprised, and I've been on multiple sides. I've been on selection committees for graduate school, for scholarships, programs that I've been on selection committees where I've read people's letters of recommendation, and you're like, damn, does this person know this person saying this about this other person? Yeah, it's crazy. So you want to ask up front. Not because I only know 2 people, so I got to get it from these 2 people, because I don't really maybe engage professors or other people in a way that they know me. If one of those letters is not going to allow you to move forward, then it's like it's actually hindering you more than not even having that letter, right? You know, I can even say that a good friend of mine who was in grad school getting a master's, they're in a PhD program, and they wanted to leave that program because they just didn't like the environment. So they applied to another university, and a professor came and gave some research. So someone gave a seminar from that university. They had a chance to go out to lunch with them and meet them and talk to them, and they applied to that university. And when they applied, one of the letters from the institution that they were at wrote them a stank letter because they didn't want them to leave. But because she made a connection to that person who gave that seminar, they pulled her file and they called the advisor at that institution that she was at and talked to them and was like, oh no, she's good. Don't worry about that. They're just disgruntled because that person is trying to leave, and she still got into that institution. So I'm not saying in any way to create any fear or whatnot. I'm just saying have the conversation, right? The communication game is real, and you just want to have it because, you know, this person is going to be representing you, and you want them to represent you to the fullest, right? All right. So you want to give them your personal statement, right? If they don't really know a lot of personal aspects of you, shoot that to them so they can kind of read it. And then maybe incorporate some of that into the letter for you. Maybe you say, if you want to talk to me before you write the letter, I'm open to meeting with you for 15 to 20 minutes to clarify or give you more details about who I am as a person and why this is so important to me. Like, I would. Now, I'm going to take a step back and just say, when I was an undergraduate student, I won't say I was paranoid, but I wasn't going to ask somebody to write me a letter unless I knew that they were down for me. And I've had professors say that they wanted to write me letters, and I was like, nah, because I don't really know you like that, right? I mean, in particular, there was one physics instructor when I was at Berkeley where, however I solved this problem in the physics, I solved it in a way where he had never seen someone solve that problem before. So after the exam, he took me to his office and he's like, you know, can you break down and show me how you solve this problem? And I know my mind thinks differently about things, so I did it. And he was like, damn, I've been here for 15 years and I've never seen anybody solve this problem right here this way, and all your stuff works. He's like, well, what do you want to do in the future? I was like, I think I want to study genetics. This and that. He's like, well, if you want a letter of recommendation from me, you know, I'll give you one, this and that. And I was like, okay. In my mind, I was like, no, I don't know if I know you like that, but I'm glad you're offering. But everyone has to kind of go about it themselves, right? But even when I'm in grad school, the people on my thesis committee, the people on my committee, they're going to say, okay, you've done enough, Fred, to graduate with a PhD. They're going to be writing me letters for my first jobs. And so this is where the street smarts come in. Most people who are grad students, they meet with the thesis committee once a year. They assemble them together, and then they talk about, these are the things that I've done over this last year. They go back, they argue this and that, they agree, and they're like, okay, and then they give you recommendations and you move on. But I'm like, you know what? I'm going to meet with each person in my thesis committee individually every month. Yeah, I mean, I was like, in my mind, one, I want them to know me. I want them to feel like they contributed to my growth. Most of the time, as I'm going into their office, I already kind of knew what I was going to do already, no matter what. I mean, I'm just keeping it 100, but I still wanted them to be able to be like, oh, did you think about this? Oh, that's a great idea. My mind was like, nah, I'm about to do that, but no, I like that too. So I was just going through the rigors and roles, right? And so when we got to the meeting with all four of them, everyone's on the same page. I've been meeting with them once a month. What's going on, Fred? I'm like, I got these donuts, this and that. We just chilling. While everybody else is stressed out trying to prove, I'm like, no, we've been meeting here once a month. And what was funny is that one professor, I didn't meet with her for like 2 months for whatever reason. And she heard I was meeting with other people. She was like, she told my boss, she was like, tell Fred to come meet with me. I was like, yeah. But it means she cared, right? And lo and behold, her husband been one of the Nobel Peace Prize too 3 years ago, CCSF. So, it's just one of those things. It's nice to make sure that you actually, again, develop a relationship with folks. That's the point that I'm trying to make. Develop a relationship. It is what it is. But you may have an idea of how important they are, but I'm just going to reinforce that people hire people that they like, and when you make a connection to somebody that's real, it's more of a likelihood that they will go and over beyond because they feel that same connection to you to want you to be successful. But if you don't make those connections, maybe because you're shy, I'm just encouraging you to move outside of your comfort zone and have real interaction with folks. Because people are always paying attention way more than you think. All right, any questions about any of that stuff?
Your bullet point number 3 is huge. As an instructor, I got a lot of requests for letters of recommendation. And I need it Saturday. It's like, well, good for you. This is Friday. And so you got to give people time to write those letters and really, be respectful of their time and the fact that they've got a lot going on.
So most of the application is going to be due probably sometime in February leading up to March, but you should be asking those people for letters of recommendation now. They're probably going to wait till the last one to write it, but you still gave them the opportunity to ask them 2 weeks ahead of time, right? I'm going to wait till the last moment because I'm busy, but I'm still glad you asked me and I have it on my calendar by this date. I need to start thinking about that letter so I can start to write that bug versus I need to write it right away because I only have a day or two because of, when you ask for it. So it's worth, getting the deadlines of the places that you want and figuring out, do you actually have to ask this person and then does emails get sent to them or they have to put information into a form or whatever? Have all those things, try to be as organized as you can about that and line that up ahead of time. All right. So, strategies for volunteer opportunities. We're getting close to the end. I know I've been talking for a while. When you're trying to, so say that you transfer to a university, or say you're here now and you have a semester where you don't have a heavy workload, and you're like, I want to try to get into a lab so I can do some research now and maybe lean that into the summertime. You can search university professors that are in areas that you're interested in, and then begin to then send them emails saying, can I get together for an informational interview? Informational interview is just a fancy way of saying, can I meet with you for 15 to 20 minutes over coffee or in your office space to talk to you about the work that you're doing? And before you do that, you want to read some of the research articles. And you're not reading it where I'm trying to understand everything about their research because maybe it's over your head and maybe they're using words because, science has to have its own language to it. And, sometimes it can definitely be foreign. But you want to be able to read through their stuff and write down questions to at least act like you kind of, interested in what they're doing in a very specific way. Right? And I'm gonna put you guys up on game right now. So my advisor in grad school, there was a guy who was in her office that was applying to the grad program, and she was on her board talking about her research to him. Because I'm saying this to you because body language means a lot. So again, most professors are going to be thinking that my research is the best thing since sliced bread, you know what I'm saying? It's the most exciting thing in the world. And he was sitting back in the chair, in the office at first, and he got up and walked right next to her to the board so she could explain her research. And that impressed the hell out of her. She's like, oh my goodness, he got up and he stood next to me and he was pointing to the different things I was talking to on the board. Those little small things make a difference, right? So you want to make sure that you're showing and you're giving your best effort to let this person know that you're super duper 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 excited about meeting them and learning about what they're doing, right? Because from there, you can pivot, and afterwards you can say, well, is it okay for me to tour your lab? Right? I would love to kind of see the equipment and meet some of the people in your lab, the grad students, the postdocs. And you could even ask them, is there anybody in your lab that's willing to take on an undergraduate student? But because you're in front of them and you guys have a rapport, they're more likely to be like, oh, okay, well, actually, let me think about that. Let's come take a look. Let's go. Versus just not meeting that person in public and trying to make a connection over email. Does that make sense? But the most exciting factor is, do they have space in their lab? If their lab only has 3 desks in it, and there's 3 people who are working in it, then they may not have the space unless someone wants to share that desk with you. And do they actually have someone who's willing to take you on, right? To be your mentor? Because it's not going to be the professor. The professor's busy doing X, Y, and Z, especially at a research one institution. They busy. But if you have a grad student or a postdoc that's like, hey, how many hours a week can you work? You're like, oh, I can work like 10 hours a week. I'm just like, oh, I don't know if that's worth my time. 10 hours a week, one experiment lasts 8 hours. You gonna go one experiment and come in here for another 2 hours? You know what I'm saying? Like that ain't, you have to kind of be able to be like, I can come here for 8 hours on Tuesday, Thursdays, and I can come in on the weekends. Like you gotta be able to talk to them, because what they're thinking about is, I'm investing in this person, right? I'm investing my energy and time into training this person. And to keep it 100, they're doing that so then they can reap dividends from you in the future, right? It's not like I'm spending all this time training you and I don't have any expectations, because one, my expectations is that this research moves forward, right? I gotta get the hell up out of here. I'm trying to get these publications. And 2, if you get trained to a place where you are an extension of my hands, then now you've just doubled the amount of work I can get done, or we can get done. Right? So I'm already knowing that when I'm coming to this lab. Because what I didn't tell you is that the first lab I was in, we were doing combinatorial chemistry. We were synthesizing prostaglandins. It's like a 9-step reaction. I'm doing step 5 and 6 with him. He got one beaker, he's doing something. I got my other beaker, I'm doing a variation that I mug. And we just, we join at the hips, right? He's teaching me how to be a chemist. So I did that for a whole semester, the whole spring semester. And then the summertime came, and at that time period, combinatorial chemistry was a new approach to chemistry. I won't get into the details, but it was new. And he wanted to write the first a review article on combinatorial chemistry in the world. He's like, Fred, can you take over my project? I'm like, hell yeah. Now, was I scared? Hell yeah, I was scared. But I took over his project during the summer. Every 2 weeks, I'm presenting my project at that time period to the grad students and to the professor like I'm a grad student. And I got him step 7 and step 8. So his investment in me allowed him to double up, write a review article, and have his research go 2 more steps that he didn't have to do anything on. And then we got step 9. That's why I got that second author on his publication, because I put the work in. You feel me? So I'm just saying that, like, that's kind of part of the game, right? Is if I get the opportunity, I'm not gonna slack on it, right? Because especially if you're working for somebody who's smart, right? The person at these research institutions, for instance, Research One, they're going to be smarter than the average person, and they're going to be smarter than the average person by some, because they're at these top institutions. So if they're there, then you have to impress them enough where they're thinking that, damn, they did some stuff that I couldn't do at that time. At least that's what I'm thinking, right? When I was working with undergraduates, I was like, okay, damn. Now I can write you the Jesus Walks on Water letter, right? But if you know how to use bunch of people smiling. Okay, go ahead.
I did a fellowship last semester in computational biology. This semester I'm working on wrapping up the project, putting it all together. How can I present it in my application for internship, including the project? How can I like, put it in my application? So people can see my technical skills which I developed during this fellowship program.
That's a good question. There's a fine balance between, you can't get into the weeds with the stuff that you're doing because there may be a word count and a limit to how much you can write. So you kind of want to focus on, this was the big picture of what I did. Maybe you talk about, this is the approach that I took for this big picture, and then maybe a sentence or two on these are the results. But you can't get into the weeds.
Okay.
Because it's just, you don't have the space for it. So, we could talk about more of that in detail if you want, offline. But I can definitely look at what you have to say and just get a sense of how appropriate it is. But you want somebody to understand, you understand what the big picture is.
Right.
This is what we were trying to accomplish with this project, and we went about doing that this way.
Right.
And these were the results, and, trying to keep it moving. All right, any other questions? Go ahead.
For the research, projects are they given, or do we have to decide, do we choose the projects, or do we have to come up with it on our own?
So you definitely don't have to come up with one. The person who's going to be your mentor is going to have an idea of what they want you to do. They may have multiple projects and say, does either one of these resonate more with you than the other, potentially? But they're definitely going to already know what they want you to do, and hopefully thought about it in a way that is doable in 8 to 10 weeks. All right, let's see. Potential points to mention to the professor. Some of these things are things that you're gonna actually have been thought about it for applying to the more REU type ones. But the reasons why you like research and why you're excited about it, how dedicated you are. We talked about how many hours a week can you work. You could talk about your grades in your science courses, and you can bring up if they want to talk to any people who can be a reference for you, that those could be available. But if you're able to make a connection to them while you're in front of them, then most likely they may not even ask for that, because they're going to get a chance to assess you as you talk to them. All right, I think that's it. So any other questions you may have for me about anything that we talked about? I know we've been going for a minute, but hopefully the things that we talked about were useful to you. Does anybody have any additional questions for me? Sure.
I had a question about cover letters. Some of the summer internships ask for cover letters, and I wasn't sure what to write in it, because some websites said it's like a place for you to expand on your resume, but other websites said it was a place for you to add your personal reasons why you want to join the internship, but I wasn't sure.
Okay, so I'm surprised that they're asking for cover letters. I mean, the cover letter can maybe be a substitute for your personal statement. Maybe they're asking for both, but I think a cover letter can be both of the things that you just mentioned. So you can expand upon potentially on your resume that you may have worked somewhere else before. You can expand upon it in a way to give more detail and get somebody excited about it. But at the same time, I think cover letters should be, how can I get someone excited about me? Right, you kind of want to give them juice, and you want to kind of write with energy that can give them, it's almost like if they don't get a chance to interview you, right, and most likely they're not, then your cover letter can kind of stand on what you would want to say in an interview to get someone excited about you, what you believe that's unique about you, and you know, what you want to try to get from this experience, but also what you believe you can bring to the table. You know, sometimes it's harder as undergraduate students at certain times in your life to I don't want to use brag, but you kind of have to talk about your strengths, right? Like, and maybe some of those things come up in the letters of recommendation that people may or may not say, but you know, you kind of want to be able to talk about that, you know, based on, you know, what you believe you bring to the table. So for example, one of the talents that I believe I have is the ability to think strategically. And when I was coming out of grad school, I was interviewing for jobs in the biotech industry, marketing jobs, business development jobs, even some sales jobs. And in all of those jobs, I had no experience. I mean, I have experience as a scientist or whatnot, and you know, I also started a nonprofit organization that I was able to kind of talk about and leverage some of those pieces. But what I talked about is my ability to ask good questions, think about all what the possibility could be, and then methodically get to that with excellency. And given the opportunity to be in this position, I'm a quick study, and I could get to a place to be able to do that for you too. And it was this is probably like 2003, and it was like when the .com kind of bust happened. So there were like sometimes 50 people applying for like one job, and I could consistently, with like no experience, be down to the top 4. I mean, like, but I knew myself in a way, and I could talk about it, and I could look you in the eye and be like, yeah, given the opportunity, yes, I could do this, I can do that. You know, I've thought a little bit about this already, and these are some of my ideas, and I would just lay that out, you know, but would love to learn more about it, would love to get your take on some of the ideas that I wouldn't engage folks, right? And so that's the approach that I would take to a cover letter. You know, I mean, you know, when you're starting off, there's only a certain amount of things you could really talk about, but even the exercise that I talked about in regards to, you know, what are the key factors you believe that will allow you to be an excellent scientist? What are your extracurriculars, and what do you think your strengths and your talents and strengths are? Just even you knowing some of that, then you can weave in some of your extracurriculars and why you believe they would add to you doing this well. And that could be written in your cover letter, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a question. So something that I'm struggling with right now is I'm trying to figure out what type of research internship I would want to get into, and because there's so many different like research out there that we can apply for. So my question for you was like, how did you kind of figure out that you wanted to get research about genetics?
Say that last part again.
Well, how did you want to, or how did you figure out that you wanted to research about genetics?
Or genetics? So for me, you know, and part of my life story is that, you know, I started at the community college too, and I was working out in the gym one day with my workout partner, and I wanted to understand why did I receive results quicker than him when we did the same routine every day. And in that moment, that spark, you know, got ignited in me about studying genetics and wanting to get a PhD in genetics. So it was very intuitive in some ways, because it wasn't like I thought about it, but when that spark happened and I had visions of myself doing things in the future, I could feel that passion in me to want to do it. And then I let that drive me. So I really believe that we should do things and try things that excite us, right? And even the way our bodies are built, when we do things that we're passionate about, that excite us, you know, it secretes hormones and pheromones that make us feel good, so we can continue to do it. And at this stage of where you're at, you know, in my mind, there's a lot of things that you could do and get excited about it, but it's more about having the right mentor that can guide you and challenge you and train you on how to think like a scientist. Like, that's the most important thing, because, you know, there may be a part of you saying, you know, as a molecular biologist, I want to learn this technique and that technique. You know, techniques are going to come and go, and people are going to develop new ones, and that's going to be part of just baked into being a scientist, is learning new things. But that ability to, like, you know, model build and ask questions and problem solve, and be in an environment where someone can do that in a very nurturing way based on your personality, is like, so it's almost like just jump in the river and just let it take you. And then as you get exposed to more things, and you get exposed to things in seminars that may be there, or this and that, you're like, oh, that kind of resonates with me. You know, I knew I wanted to study genetics, but it wasn't until I took my genetics course, my last semester at Berkeley, where I learned about the Y chromosome, and I learned about this gene on the Y chromosome called sex region Y, that one gene by itself, if it gets transferred from the Y to the X, because it's in that pseudo-autosomal region where the X and Y can cross over and share genetic material, you can be an XX person. With that one gene, you will physically look like a male. That one gene by itself, you know, now you won't be a fertile male, but you will physically look like a male. So I was learning about it, I was like, oh, that's what I want to do for grad school. And I actually looked up and found this professor at MIT named David Page, who was doing that work. So I'm like, I want to go to MIT and I want to work for him. Because again, that passion, that excitement kind of came up. I went out to, I was in Boston for a conference the year that I was getting ready to apply, and I went to that guy's lab and met him. It's like, you know, love to come by, I'm about to apply here for grad school next year, you know, give me the opportunity, I would love to work for you. So then I applied to MIT, I don't get in, I don't even get an interview. And I was like, that's how y'all feel about me? I can't even get an interview? So I know, I gotta have my feelings hurt, right? So, and I can say, so anyway, all I have to say is that the guy who I did my second research with, who was up the food chain, he was like, oh, MIT must have made a mistake. You know what, let me pick the phone up real quick and call the chair of the biology department at MIT to make sure they know they made that mistake, and then they're ready to let you get in, right? Like he was that dude, right? And I was like, no. He's like, you sure? I was like, nah, I'm good, right? He's like, you sure? He's like, I can make the phone call. But something in me was like, one, I don't want to get in that way, and I got interviews at these other good schools, just let me take this path, right? So anyway, to make a long story short, when I went to UCSF, there was no one there that I wanted to do research for, but it felt right. I connected to some students there, and it was like, this is where I need to be. And the very second week that I was there in grad school, we had a retreat for all the new incoming grad students. And this woman that I had got my PhD from just started there as a new assistant professor. She was a postdoc in that dude's lab at MIT that I wanted to work for, and I became her first grad student. You can't even write that up. But I'm so glad that I listened to my intuition, and it said, because if I would have went to that guy's lab at MIT, he's already well established, I would have had to fight. They found a project. Scientists are territorial as hell. You know, you trying to find a project, no, that's my project, no, I thought about that already, that's my project too. Like, sometimes they can be petty with stuff. But because I was her first grad student, I could choose between other things in her lab. And how successful I am is determines if she'll get tenure. So she's invested in me being successful because we're joined at the hips. For my personality, that's the best. You know, like if I can't be the king, I want to be the hand of the king, right? So, you know, but all that to say is that, like, I follow my intuition, but it's just jumping on the river and just letting it take you, and then follow your passion, and then you'll find it. Any other questions? All right, y'all. You guys have a great weekend.